Did they ever go on to that other job school? I just go on special fire. Okay. Or the area. Because we're gonna have to do take a look at it, choose capital.
I know last week.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. There's
oh yeah. Okay, we'll call this meeting of the Delta Township Board to order. The board members and guests rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Bowman.
Here.
Trustee Brewer. Present. Trustee Cascarella. Trustee Mojica. Treasurer Fedewa.
Here.
Purpose present. Supervisor
Here. Thank you. Motion to excuse trustees Cascarella and Mojica would be in order.
So moved.
Support.
Been moved and supported. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carried. We have the agenda before us. Any additions or deletions? Not a motion to approve.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you. There's support.
Support.
There is support. All those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Public comment. Now's the time to speak if you're here for public comment. Everyone to speak.
Can you elaborate on what public comment is?
Just a chance to speak to the board on any topic.
Yes, I would like to speak.
Sure, go ahead. Just state your name and your address for the record.
Yes, I am Shannon Simon. My address is 815 Trenton Place, Lansing, 48917. I am here because I am a resident of Delta Township for the past 20 some years. And I also teach the dance classes over at the Delta Enrichment Center. I've grown that program to about 125 students. We run classes on 3 days a week. And I have concerns over the building there, as we have seen that our roof has collapsed as of last January. We have our wall that is split open, and we have constant leaks with a bucket on the floor while teaching children. I have concerns on the safety with that. I do have some papers, just some photos that I've taken as I've arrived at class, if you wouldn't mind me passing those out.
Sure. Yeah.
I guess I could do this. That would be an easier way. So the pictures that are shown there are in room 304, which has probably had the most damage done. All of the rooms, I'm sure you're aware, on that side of the building, including the rooms that are used for the 39ers, have leaking in there. So we offer all of these classes. A lot of people usually come to me, I'm sure you guys know, that the Drolet Community Center is also at capacity, being full of classes. And it's a great thing that we have all of these classes running. But that also means that there's not really a place for us if this building were to, entirely be unusable. So this is my concern that I wanted to bring to the board today.
Well, thank you. We appreciate this. Brian, I guess I wasn't aware that it was in such horrible condition, and I know we had issues, but I didn't realize it was like this.
Yeah, the board recalls that probably 3 or 4 years ago, we patched the roof, and some of that was kind of the impetus for our facilities studies too. So getting into that, the roof on the, north side of the building there is pretty much not salvageable. It's going to be very difficult to patch anymore. And getting into that project of trying to put a new roof on is very, very expensive. So I was not aware of the, I guess that I know that at different times, depending on the rain, we have had some leaks. I didn't know it was a constant thing. So looking more into it, but we do have, the long-term solution as part of the partnership with Waverly of moving into the cold space, but that space is not going to be available for a couple more years. So we likely need to find we probably need to find some temporary space and look at probably closing down that north side of the building with those older classrooms.
Yeah, that my question was going to be around the space at Colt, because that's where I thought we were going to transition those programs over there because they had availability. I guess I didn't recall the timeline being that far out. Has that changed, or is that what it always was?
It was always a few years out. I think it maybe got pushed back one additional year. So I think we were looking at like 24, 25, and now it's like definitely 25,
26.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we're at with that. That I know Bernie and I have discussed some, other options. I know at one point we discussed some of those with the board about possibly looking at maybe if it was possible to tear down one side of the building, but keep the main area, which is a voter precinct, and the kind of the luncheon area, which is still, that part is still okay. But the classrooms do have some trouble. And when you try to chase those leaks and try to chase the roofing leaks, you're getting into placing a lot of stuff through the walls, the ceiling, all through the rooms. That's about as good of a update as I can give at this point.
Sure, Dennis.
Yeah, I remember we had extensive discussions about it, and then there was mold issues. This looks like it's a recipe and an incubator for mold as well. And facilities is a topic we're going to be talking about tonight. But has there been any thought about rental space, say like at Lansing Mall, just moving everything out of that location? For a couple of years.
It's my understanding that we're looking at some potential temporary space. I don't know if it's specifically at the Lansing Mall or anything in particular. I think it was trying to get through our classes and
this year.
Shannon, I know we spoke at the Parks Master Plan and had talked about that in terms of finding some adequate space.
It sounds like just one last comment question is that might be on the precipice of saying, it just makes sense to close this thing down. That would drive home the fact that our facilities are failing. But if we're going to close off a section and then it's downsized, I don't know how waterproof the remaining area is. I don't know if that has its own problems at all. As well, I don't know what the reduced capacity, it's going to affect the amount of participants in classes that we may have. It's sort of like a cascade effect. So I'm just wondering if we need to step back and look at, does it make sense, maybe as a strategic move, just to close that thing down and then looking for some rental space as a temporary substitution.
Yeah, I think at least for the north end. Marcus, I see us on the call.
At least till the Waverly facility becomes
There's four classrooms worth of space. Marcus can probably answer better. There's 4 classrooms in the older part of the building. That is the challenge.
I appreciate you bringing that to our board's attention.
And do these classrooms have special equipment or special flooring or anything like that that would be expensive to replace?
Yes,
Okay.
so we had just purchased a dance floor for my classes, which was a decent amount, and that floor is being leaked on, which can ruin the Marley dance floor if it continues.
Is that transportable? Could we take that elsewhere?
Yes.
Okay,
it's a part of the
that's
floor.
good.
Yes.
So we could rent some space somewhere, possibly in the mall, lots of parking. and put the floor in there. Anything else like bars, mirrors, things like that?
There are no mirrors in that room. And the bars are portable that have been used in both rooms.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm in support of doing what we can do to find a more viable location for you. Safety is everything. And so I'm in support of Brian and, you know, looking into that. That would be great.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll continue down with the agenda. Then the next up is the consent agenda. It's the pleasure of the board. And the items on our consent agenda today.
I move that the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there support?
Support.
There is support. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on approving the consent agenda?
Trustee Cohen,
Yes.
trustee Cascarilla,
Yes.
trustee Brewer,
Yes.
trustee Monica,
Yes.
treasurer Fedorov,
Yes.
clerk, yes, supervisor Fletcher.
Yes.
Motion.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll do the items of business. Number 4, Carrier Creek Sewer Interceptor Repair Contract Award. Did you want to say anything about this or anything at all, or this ready to go?
I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I do have Gary Marchand here in Teppertech. If there are any questions, this project's been on our radar a while. We've been working, trying to get it built. We've had some issues of easements acquisition that slowed us down, but it's taken on a renewed priority. It's already a priority, but even more so with helping flow through this section of pipe. So we did put this in the package for the state funding for the Ultium, so it is funded now through that grant that we received. So yeah, we were happy to get 5 bids. We did quite a range, but ultimately we're comfortable with a low bidder and with their expertise and ability to complete the project. So we'd like to move forward here prepared to do so.
Great. I'd like to make a motion.
Oh, I have a question actually.
Okay, go ahead.
So is this property transfer complete? We needed to have some bids move forward on this.
It is not. We are, we have a signed purchase agreement. And then at the title search, they discovered an old mortgage that had not been discharged. So the property owner is working through getting that discharged. So nothing's changed with our purchase agreement, but it has not been finalized yet in terms of that. And then we're also working on trying to get access to the property in the meantime.
In as far as the discharge of the mortgage, so the title is colored because of that. Is it with the current owner or was it a previous owner?
With the current owner.
Okay, and as far as we can understand, it was the obligation for that mortgage was met in full, so there shouldn't be a problem. It's just a question of it being formally discharged.
Yes, it's just working through the bank. He's working with Flagstar Bank. He's not set the world afire dealing with it, so we've been pressuring for the last couple of weeks, trying to push this forward and offering to get it settled for them and working with his attorney, which it has not gone as fast as we would like.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Say.
Andrew.
I move that the Delta Township Board accept the base bid from Kaminga and Ruth Inc. The 2022 for the 2022 Carrier Creek Interceptor Improvements Project in an amount not to exceed $2,142,054. And I move that the township manager be authorized and directed to execute the necessary documents related to the aforementioned project.
Support. Very supportive. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion carried. Item number 5, the Ultium 3 LLC bid package contract awards, and we've got several to go through here. Did you want to add anything on this piece of it?
Sure. Thank you, Supervisor Fletcher. Board members, thank you for your time. We do have Gary Marchand again from Teppertech and Jennifer Drinnen with OHM. this has been a real heavy lift, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of moving pieces. We've got a large team. Tetra Tech's working on the water distribution side of things and OHM on the sewer collection side of things. I want to thank them and their teams for their effort. It's literally thousands of hours of staff time. You know, it's been about a year since we first heard about this project. I think I personally have about 1,000 hours invested into it just since then. So just by way of kind of saying this is a big deal, this will be the first milestone of several. You know, we award some projects tonight that give us the critical infrastructure just to get us some initial volumes of water and sewer next summer. And then we'll be following right behind that with more projects to boost our capacity to the ultimate amount that we need. That won't come online until towards the end of 2024. So we've got a couple more years of a heavy lift here to deliver all these, but thanks to our team, we've met all of our internal deadlines, and we've had our first round of projects here that we brought for tonight. So it's kind of broken up into several pieces, and there's several actions. Basically, what we're doing is we're going to award 2 construction contracts. Bid package 1 and bid package 2 to the same contractor. And then we're going to amend the contracts for OHM and Tetra Tech to add engineering services. And then the last one is to give the manager authorization to negotiate a contract change order with the bidder. So for the 3 bid packages, we got good coverage on bid package 1. We got, we got 3 bids. Bid package 2, we only got 1 bid, and bid package 3, we got no bids, which is very disappointing, given how much effort we put in to get this thing out. We had good coverage, 9, 10 or more bidders at the pre-bid meeting. We had good turnouts at our walkthroughs. So it's disappointing to only see partial coverage on it. So, but the unfortunate thing is we need all 3 pieces of work to be able to get them up and running. So Jennifer and us have been meeting with the low bidder Dunnigan Brothers to try to craft a reduced scope of work just for the most critical stuff that we can do out of bid package 3, try to reach an equitable agreement on that, and then add that to their contract by change order. The reason to do that is because the critical timelines we're talking about here to try to get up and running by mid-June of this summer. So to put this thing back out to bid when no one bid it the first time, I'm not convinced we're going to have great luck. We've got a low bidder that wants to do these projects. We're comfortable with them as a contractor. These 2 have familiarity with him. We met with him Friday, and he seems to have a pretty aggressive, pretty good plan to complete the work. And I think it's our best shot to delivering these projects on time if we can negotiate with him and get a fair price. So that's kind of the odd thing here that we're asking, but it's our best chance to be able to deliver these on the timeline that we've been asked to deliver.
Mary, questions?
So, Ernie, well, kind of 2 very different but joint questions. Did they indicate why they didn't bid on this to start with, number 1? And number 2, do they have any experience with lift stations?
Jennifer, do you want to cover that one?
So I'm Jennifer Drennan with OHM Advisors, project manager. And I did, after the bid, call several of the contractors and stuff. Dunnigan Brothers, we had all 3 of these bid packages, the bid for due at the same time. And he mentioned he just ran out of time to put them together. So, one lesson learned, maybe we could have moved the bid date for that one, a day or 2 to give people more time. Talking to many of the contractors that were interested in the project, they had mentioned that they really thought Bart Mallow was going to bid this, and they had an inside track on it because they're out there at Altium right now doing all of the construction work. So that kind of deterred a few people. One of the other things, just talking to them too, is the work that is done at bid package 3, which is the existing GM pump station. It was, the original intention was to get a whole bunch of the work done inside the pump station and then in the wet well, as well as the underground, and just trying to clean it up for the next phase of the project, which was going to be the equalization basin. But how that work kind of turned out, it was a good portion of underground work, and then the other stuff would have been done by a general contractor, but it wasn't a, you know, it was less amount there for that, but it did require, you know, mechanical people, electrical people, people that could do concrete. So it wasn't enough for a general contractor really to prime it because the underground work was pretty significant. So it was just kind of an awkward project a little bit. And with how much work is out there right now for people to bid, it wasn't big enough to take that risk. It's the impression that they're getting. So
but they have subs for the electrical, the mechanical that we were.
So we've really pared down the scope to get the main pipe connections that we need in and out of the station. We pulled out some of the work that can wait until the next package will be more attractive. You know, bigger package that will be more attractive to the general contractor. But yes, he has a little bit of electricals left in it. He's got to get covered on that.
Thank you.
As far as you asked, I think, Mary, about the qualifications of doing pump station work, you can speak to that.
Oh, yeah, and yes, Duncan Brothers has done pump stations before, similar to the ones that we're doing right now.
Okay.
I just wanted to say I appreciate you taking the time to go over the bid with them because it came in lower. And I think I read that you kind of met with them to make sure that they understood the scope and what was expected. So I really appreciate that conversation took place because it does sort of flare your eyelash a little bit when you see the bid coming in so much lower. So thank you for doing that.
Do we really need to authorize to negotiate? Because you don't have the change order yet, do you? Do we really need to just authorize you to do that, or you just, when you've got it ready, you bring it back to you? Because you always get authority to negotiate things, and then we approve it, we agree with it.
Well, I think it's the whole issue of not putting it back out for bid when we got no bids. That's why.
Yeah,
it was out to bid.
I think you want it memorialized in some action, right? By approving this.
I think so, yes. I think in this project, I mean, everything is moving fast, so anything that we can do to expedite that, so then wait till December, just ordering supplies and that type of thing.
No, I didn't. Sorry.
Yeah, I appreciate the need for being nimble on this too. I just want to make a comment reading this. This was probably a nightmare to get your hands around, and your mind around, and then throw out the bidders and all that stuff, and then the logistics and dealing with, you know, all the consultants and the Altium battery people and all that stuff. So I read it all, and I just want to commend the staff for putting together what I think is a very understandable document. It's quite detailed, it's quite convoluted, but it makes sense. And so it does take this particular skill set in explaining this stuff, especially when it comes to various moving pieces in almost a three-dimensional fashion. So I just think you did an excellent job in presenting this to the board, and I wanted to mention that.
Any other discussion? They're ready to make motions, and Mary?
I move that the Delta Township Board accept the bid from Dunnigan Brothers for bid package 1 and award a construction contract for the Altium 3 battery plant bid package 1 water and sanitary sewer improvements project in the amount of $8,121,732.50 contingent on receipt of executed easement documents, and that the township manager be authorized and directed to execute all necessary documents on behalf of Delta Township at the appropriate time. And I'd like to add that we will make housekeeping typo corrections in this motion.
Point of order.
Yes.
Is there a way we can combine all 5 of these under the clerk's motion?
I don't really want to,
I
but
don't want to.
no, I think it's way too complicated when we start doing the paperwork that we have to do in the clerk's office.
Okay, because it's laid out here in detail, so.
Support. Been moved and supported. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carried. Down to item 5B. Andrea.
I move that the Delta Township Board accept the bid from Dunnigan Brothers for bid package 2 and award a construction contract for Altium 3 battery plant bid package 2 water and sanitary sewer improvements project in the amount of $2,756,000, contingent on receipt of executed easement documents, and that the township manager be authorized and directed to execute all necessary documents on behalf of Delta Township at the appropriate time.
Support. There is support. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Now we're on to item 5C. Sure.
I move that the Delta Township Board authorize the township manager to negotiate a change order with Dunnigan Brothers for the schedule critical items of work in bid package 3 and add this work to their contract for bid package 2 due to no bids having been received for this work.
Or it's been moved and supported. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Item 5D.
I move that the Delta Township Board approve the proposed engineering services contract amendment number 3 to the agreement with Tetra Tech for construction engineering services at a cost not to exceed $555,905, and that the township manager be authorized and directed to execute all necessary documents on behalf of Delta Township at the appropriate time.
Is there support? Support. There is support. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Motion carries. Item 5E. Excuse me.
I move that the Delta Township Board approve the proposed engineering services contract amendment number 3 and number 4 to the agreement with OHM Advisors for Design and Construction Engineering Services at a cost not to exceed $688,720, and that the township manager be authorized and directed to execute all necessary documents on behalf of the Delta Township at the appropriate time.
Is there support?
Support.
There is support. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you for all the work that went into this.
Thank you very much.
Item number 6, adoption of the fiscal year 2023 budget recommendation. Pleasure reporting that. Dennis.
I'd like to move that the Delta Township Board adopt the budget for 2023 by appropriating funds as follows: $24,295,300 for the general fund, $3,587,800 for the ambulance fund, $124,000 for the brownfield redevelopment fund, $25,500 for the Economic Development Corporation Fund, $78,700 for the Corridor Improvement Authority, $100,000 for the Debt Service Fund, $1,389,800 for the Capital Projects Fund, $5,906,800 for the Sewer Enterprise Fund, $6,748,500 for the Water Enterprise Fund. Estimated revenues to support the appropriation above the $21,272,600 for the general fund, $3,561,500 for the ambulance fund, $127,000 for the brownfield redevelopment fund, $184,500 for the Corridor Improvement Authority, $361,000 for the debt service fund, $6,271,000 for the sewer fund, and $5,613,000 for the water development fund. Is that last sentence supposed to be part of the motion?
No, that's just.
Oh, okay. And I so move.
Is there support? There is support. Discussion.
I do have a question.
Okay.
In looking back at the the revenues in this document. The corridor improvement authority, the 70,700 budget. The only thing that I see in the actual budget document, besides what's outlined in the cover memo, is the property taxes, the real property taxes that are estimated to be collected. And it's a gross number, and it also includes a deduction for the CIA and the brownfield. So my question is, are we going to see an expenditure for the CIA, a budget expenditure line item?
Yeah, that's in, let's see, it's in here. There. Number on here.
I couldn't find it.
Yeah, I think it's at the end. It's one of the last. Yeah, it's on page,
we can do this offline. I just want to know.
no, it is in here just so you can see. So it's page 174 of the PDF. So they have budgeted for consultants, the 2% admin fee to the township, and then reimbursing us $50,000 as like a part one of their expenses that the township fronted on their behalf.
Okay, I'll take a look at it. Thank you. I just
Yeah,
wanted to highlight it.
Other questions?
So does that mean that none of the money for the CIA in this particular budget is going into anything specified in the development plan?
Yeah, it is, well, all of that's specified in the development plan. So the study, the corridor plan study.
Okay.
Yeah, and then paying us back is all in there.
Okay. But no. Thank you.
But it is still on the administrative side.
Here we go. Go ahead. Thank you.
Now, I noticed in your memo, Brian, talking about our next topic, which we get on the building, you said there's some expenses related to the police building we may have to add in. I know there's a discussion tonight about leasing space at the mall for the community center and renovating that if we leased it. So where would that go in the budget? I know this is already a deficit for the operating expense for the first time. And it's being, the hole's being plugged by the fund balances. So would we just add to the deficit with these additional projects?
That's that's something that we would have to look at using either ARP funds or fund balance for additional.
Those would be capital likely.
Project.
Could be considered capital projects, depending, not the rent, if you rent space, but.
Could we use the ARPA dollars for that?
Okay.
ARPA dollars, can they be used?
Yeah, they can pretty much be used for anything. They're considered revenue replacements, so they can be used for any governmental purpose.
And so a budget is a spending plan. It's not written in stone when you pass it. And so there's always adjustments throughout the year. The revenues may come in higher in some areas. The expenditures may be lower in some areas. So I think it'll be important for the board when we get maybe a quarterly report or a half-year report where we're at on the budget as originally adopted and where we're at and projected for the end of the year. I think that'll be telling at that point.
And if there's, our projects that we want to do, we can decide if it's something we want to offset something else or something new.
Other discussions? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Treasurer Fedewa?
Yes.
Trustee Cascarella?
Yes.
Trustee Brewer?
Yes.
Trustee Bowen?
Yes.
Trustee Monica?
Yes.
Clerk Clark, yes. Supervisor Fletcher?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor and board members. Just want to start off by thanking all of you. This is the agenda tonight. A lot of large things to take off the list in terms of the firefighter contract, the budget, LPM, and Furrier Creek. So these are all large projects. So appreciate your support for those. I really appreciate our staff, our team of staff who have worked very hard, specifically on the Ultium project. That is, as Ernie mentioned, it's almost full-time job for several of them. And I'm very proud of all the entities that are involved. The township really leads the way, and I'm particularly proud that we really strive to do things the right way and try to avoid issues and clean up issues in very extraordinary environments and circumstances. So as referenced, I think in some of the materials too, of cleaning up issues, and I don't like to be critical of the past because you don't know, but for instance, the cleaning up easements from 2002 when everything was moving very quickly with that GM project. I really appreciate the care that our staff takes in trying to think ahead and making sure that trying to do things the right way. So just wanted to mention that. I was asked to provide a letter of support. As you all know, CATA, there's a lot going on with public transportation. Mary's given some updates on the basically the partnership with CATA and E-Tran. So they are applying for Attain grant first. What's it called? Micro transit in this area. So that would be trying to serve some of our industry and that type of thing in Delta Township in the industrial park, where it's not really set up very well to have direct routes. So this would be a federal grant that they're looking for. And I think that's been mentioned before. I know when they came to the CIA and presented, they talked about some of the different federal monies that are available to CATA that they're applying for. So this is one of those programs that they're trying to work on to provide some different public transit options that would get employees to work and help serve the employers and see federal grants. Speaking about the budget, we were awarded the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for 2022 budget. So congratulations to Courtney, who submitted all the paperwork for that. So we've received that recognition in the past for our budget presentation. So it's always nice to get those as well. We did have the community awards October 27th. So for those who didn't make it, I provided the pamphlet there. So very nice event again. Several deserving award winners. And so I wanted you to all see that. Lastly, if you haven't driven by, the Amazon facility is getting very close to completion. So I know they are pouring pathway right now, and we have a lot of their parking lot done. So we are still working on that issue at the Board of Water and Light substation, trying to get that solved, looking more like probably going to go in behind it, but just kind of highlight some of the issues when you're trying to build pathway and obtain easements. There's drainage, there's road commissions, there's a lot of different things that you have to work through. So we're hoping that we can get that taken care of. But that's all I have tonight, but happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Well, I was just going to ask, since the assistant chief is here, what's the status of the auto owner / Mark Court? Is that house a loss?
I'm sorry, that's the question again.
I was wondering the status of the house fire.
It's still under investigation. And we just talked about Zach. Our inspector is still investigating.
Okay.
But it is a loss, right? Yeah, that's a loss, a complete loss.
When auto owners tear that down, we'll be going to tear down the house next to it.
Well, speaking of auto owners, are they waiting bated breath when the pathway around Amazon plant gets done, so they eagerly start their own commitment for the pathway along their property?
They have not inquired about that.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Now committee of the whole, the item 7 election debrief. Brian has a memo that he passed out earlier, and it's on our table. Back over to you, Brian.
Sounds good. I apologize for emailing this out late, so if you didn't get a chance to read it, but I wanted to just debrief on our 2 ballot proposals. And I know I sent out an update, so you've seen some of the numbers before. Provided some additional breakdown of absentee versus in-person voting. So I just wanted to kind of walk you through this really quick, start a discussion on, I guess, debrief, where we're at, and then start talking about next steps. No real decision points tonight per se, but a discussion starter. So again, where we stand right now, the sheriff's substation has been on the radar for the township for quite a long time. We had proceeded, or backing up March of 2021, the board identified that as kind of a top priority out of our facilities studies. So we moved forward with into schematic and design of the building. We had presented the schematic design, which is roughly at 30% of design, and then prior to the ballot initiative, we had approved moving forward to get this to a 60% design, which is more ready to be able to put out for construction bidding. So we have completed quite a bit of work with that in terms of some of the subcontractors that were needed, survey, soil boring, wetland delineation, that type of thing. We still would need quite a bit of funds to move that to 60% completion, which would be the next milestone, and that would get it to kind of plans that we have on the shelf, depending on what the next steps are decided by the board. In the meantime, as Supervisor Fletcher mentioned, there's some projects that, with some of our older facilities that you continually are dealing with the water problems. So over there, we have had water problems, especially with the canopy roof. We had some rotting of wood. We have water going back towards the building, creating voids under the building, which we've filled in the past with flowable fill, but still chasing some of those issues. Another main issue is we do have a water main that goes under the parks building that we'd like to get that rectified as soon as possible. We did have a water main break a couple of weeks ago behind the parks building. It's kind of a close call. So that's kind of where we stand right now. We are under contract with Chrisman to get the building up to 60% design, but we did have protections in there. So at this point, Ernie's told them pencils down and wait for further direction. So I guess that's probably one of the main decision points that we have to make moving forward, is if the building is still a priority to continue to invest to get those plans up to a point. If there's no interest in going forward with the building, then there's no point in continuing down that road. I tried to draw out some options moving forward. See, option 1 is do nothing. I think it's pretty self-explanatory what we have there. We can continue to limp along, but it presents a lot of problems and investment into a building that's very old, and it's going to be very costly to try to keep running, and we know is already an inadequate facilities for deputies.
And yeah, Brian, I guess I would say when I read that, it's not a do nothing option. The option is keep that building, but tremendous investment into it. So it's not a do nothing, it's start investing in the existing building.
Yeah, thank you for yeah, that's an important point, because it has some very big challenges that we've have continually pushed off, knowing that a new building was coming down the road.
Brian, on that point, do we have any kind of estimates about what the immediate needs are in that building, just to kind of maintain it for use? What those costs are?
We, not off the top of my head, we'd have to do some work to kind of break that down. I know when we went through the exercises of determining what it would cost to renovate the building versus building it. So we have some of those, not all that we would necessarily have to do. So you do have those costs, but again, depending on how you look at it, of just making repairs and then versus also making it functional and inadequate. One of the things that we talked about and put out in election materials, attraction and retention is very difficult right now in law enforcement, and one of the opportunities is to hire more female deputies. We don't have very adequate facility for that, for evidence handling, for interview rooms, other just general locker room space, meeting space. So a lot of that is inadequate. So there's, you kind of have to break it out between what do we have to do to just keep the building going, band-aided, the mechanical, plumbing, roofing, that type of thing, versus then also the.
Do you remember offhand what the estimate for the renovations and improvements was, just total compared to the rebuild? I'm trying to jog my memory, and I can't remember what those figures were.
It was over 50% of the value. I know,
Right.
but I don't remember what the number
Yeah, that's
was.
what I'm trying to remember.
And it doesn't solve the problem of the female locker room, which I think is.
The renovations didn't include that.
There's no place to put it.
Yeah, and I can backtrack and get you those numbers. I know it crossed.
It might be helpful to refresh our minds about what that was. Just
it crossed the threshold, so it wasn't as much as a new building, but it crossed the threshold where the consultant said that once it crosses this, you're better off building new,
sure,
and then addressing all the other shortcomings that you have.
Is there a reason in the renovations it wouldn't have included a women's locker room?
Well, I think the renovations were only to fix the building kind of as is, and then once you start adding on, then it basically, I think that feeds into the thresholds of why it becomes, you cross the threshold into you need to build a new building.
Well, and plus the new building was designed for the new buildings twice the size of what's there. And so there's just not enough space to get all the function that we really want to incorporate in there.
Yeah, so the current building space is roughly 7,000 square feet. So in order to build what we need, it was the new building you're proposing was roughly 16,000 square feet. So more than double, less than 22,000 square feet, which was the initial building designed back in 2008, I believe.
And we have to remember the facility study looked at each building, just what it would take to bring each building up to whatever you want to term it, compliance with everything. It was not looking at, does it meet the needs of the township? Are there other things we could do there? Just what would it take to bring it all up to speed? So, it obviously didn't consider things like additions and stuff to the existing.
This might be helpful to be able to compare apples to apples, though, especially with communicating to residents about the needs, because it's hard to say, oh, well, now we're getting, more than double the square feet, because they're like, oh, now you're just building a big new building, but helping understand, it would cost us X dollars, we'd still have an older building, but to meet at least the basic needs, and this is, what to build new. I just think it could be helpful to have a little more information to be able to talk about in that regard.
Yes. Yeah, we armchair quarterback this. I thought some of the numbers were interesting, especially when it was the absentee voters that or the in-person voters that was kind of a high number, but the absentee voters for the substation was quite high, which.
Say that again.
Well, it's right here. It's right in the memo. Right. So the
well, I understand I ran the election. I'm just trying to find.
Yeah. So the absentee voters, 49% in favor and 51 against. So the open question I have is, did they get the information soon enough? I mean, we have it on our website and things like that. But if there had been a campaign, if you will, to individually contact those absentee voters, I wonder if that would have made a difference. Not just doing that, but also having the sort of the financials that Andrea, you're alluding to. And I'm just wondering if we were to do this again, would that be a strategic plan that we put in place? And I just think that we're asking the township to make a major investment for a substantial portion of the county sheriff's office, and I think the Eaton County sheriff. It'd be nice to have them weigh in on this too, if we do this enough round.
What does weigh in mean?
Render an opinion.
Well, you have to be careful on that. I mean, you personally can, but you can't use the office to weigh in on millage campaigns. I mean, there's just a whole lot of campaign finance law.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
So it's a very careful line.
Right.
And the buildings will be in Delta Township exclusively for the use of Delta Township deputies, right? So
right. Yeah. So, but I agree with you, Andrea. I think that doing nothing is really not an option. I think we have to have a strategic plan, but I think we have a little bit of ground with decide how we want to proceed on that. Some of that's just reviewing the financials. And how we go from there is opinion by the board.
I think it's important also that the board present a united front, which we did not do on this event at all. I mean, we had people voting no totally, not wanting to do any aspect of it. And there was different defeated motions on how it would be presented. And at the community meetings we had, not one board member came but me. And I think that is, I don't think that we as a board demonstrated that we really supported this project. And I think that we need to do a better job of that. It's very disappointing that it calls into question where we really are. And we're on this issue. And I don't just, and I think the other piece of it, separate from that, which I think has a big responsibility in the outcome of what happened. But the second piece of it is there was really voter fatigue on the length of this ballot. If you look at the undervotes on our project, was significant. And when you have a November election in an even year, you are always going to have a very full ballot, and you're always going to have Delta Township at the bottom.
Yeah, the drop off rate.
Do you know what the percentage of undervote was?
I can tell you that for just to give you a point of comparison, the governor's undervote, and we had what do we have? We had 17,135 ballots cast. 94 people did not vote in the gubernatorial race. 245 did not vote in the Secretary of State race. 399 did not vote in the AG race. And for ours on the bond proposal, 1,331 did not vote.
On both of them?
On the bond proposal. The public safety had undervote of 1,209. And all of the statewide proposals were those numbers were 3-digit numbers.
So that means option 2, if we go to next year, we do a special election. We could have the ballot all to ourselves. It gives us more time. One of the pros would be give us more time to educate voters on what's wrong with the building, why we need more space, why we need the women's locker rooms, that sort of thing. We have to pay for it, but at least it's faster than going to 2024.
Where we will find ourselves on the bottom of the ballot again.
Yeah.
What's the cost
In a
roughly
presidential
of trust money on special?
The Greenwood School election cost about 45,000. So we would do the election for, and they're our largest. I think we could do it for under 100. We would have some cost savings in the sense that City of Charlotte, all the city election, or most of the city elections are next year. So we would pay just a proportion of like the setup for the county. It would be prorated. It wouldn't be a standalone like a school election. If there's only one, they pay for all of the county work on it also. That's about the only cost savings we would have, but it is a cost savings.
You can consolidate precincts too, which
you can consolidate precincts. We would not have to open 16. And we could go to 5 or 6 precincts.
What's the historic voter turnout on special elections, single issues on the ballot versus and next one will be the presidential each turnout?
Look back on some old reports.
Because that becomes the problem when it's all by itself, is that now you're convincing people to turn out to vote just for that. And unfortunately, traditionally, it's those who are opposed to things who are more motivated usually to turn out than those who support.
But maybe the absentee might change that.
I think Prop 3 and Prop 3 of 18 and Prop 2 of 22 will make a significant difference in how ballots are cast, and it has to be, it's my understanding that it has to be in place for 23 elections, but I'm not 100% positive on that.
The 9 days of early voting, that's the thing.
Well, and yeah,
paid postage,
all of that, which is we're working on. We've already started the process of getting a return postage thing where we would pay for just envelopes that are mailed back.
Very question, not to get a little bit off track on this, but the 9 days of early voting, that's at the precincts?
No, it wouldn't be, no, it does not have to be at the precincts and really couldn't be at the precincts.
I just wondered how that would
work.
And it seems like that would drive up costs. That's what I was just
I did an interview this morning with the Washington Post, and that's one of the things we talked about, is no one's going to be able to get 9 days. So we'd have to set a precinct up because you have to have precinct workers. So Brian doesn't know this yet, but the consideration in my mind is one of 2 things. And my first choice would be to have the boardroom for 9 days.
So the difference between the 9 days of in-person and voting absentee at the clerk's office is that you'd have a precinct set up with a tabulator, so people could see that it's tabulated versus just.
And you're still always going to have absentee ballots because you're going to have people, snowbirds that are gone. You're going to have people that are more homebound and don't go to a precinct. So you're always going to have some AVs, but I think there is a clear desire for early voting. And there's a division among clerks in the state, the small township clerks that are part-time and have ballots sitting on their kitchen counters are very opposed to this.
I would have to take a little exceptionary too, as far as having the board united. I agree, we need to sell it, but you said that there's some on the board that didn't want to do anything. That was not a message I heard from anybody on this board. Everybody was supportive of doing something.
Well, actually, no, that's not the vote count, but that's okay.
Right. but it was everybody voiced support, you know, in doing this. Some of us voted no because I knew it would be too failure. So if it's voting against the option of splitting it off, not voting, and I voted first to have it all combined. So I don't think that trying to say that the board's position was what it was. I don't think that that's really conducive to anything.
We can agree to disagree.
So it sounds like a special election next year is the way we're kind of thinking, because we want to keep moving forward with this.
Yeah, I think we'll go down again if you do that.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I'd rather see it tied to some other election.
You'd rather have it in November 24th.
I prefer to see it.
Does it have to be in November? Is there a reason it could be in August?
We probably, the goal would be no August election, 24. So it would be June.
Or well, the primary. Okay.
The primary or the presidential?
Or the presidential primary in March.
The primary, well, Mary, you talked about the change of the primary.
It could be
from
either,
August to June.
right?
But I'm saying not the general election.
Right. You know, I think we need to get our heads wrapped around this and work on the financials a little bit, so we have a unified position of what we think we want, how we want to sell this, and I think how we want to proceed will probably gel with the board as we go along in that process. We're not making a decision tonight, and we do want to have some supplemental information come back to us. So discussion can continue. And I think we'll have some sort of consensus, or we think we have our best shot. As we'll see.
In answer to your question, Ken, there was a special election in 11 of 17. Next year, but yeah. I don't remember what the election was, but it had a 19% turnout.
17 was before the reason absentee voting.
Yeah, let me try a 19 one. It made it significant. Well, it's a relative term. When I say significantly more. There wasn't a standalone in 19. Our only election in 19 was Lansing schools and the city of Lansing did it. So we haven't had 18. But we had 21 on it.
Yes, those financials together, including the whole discussion.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot more coming in the whole discussion on this.
Yeah.
Brian, are you going to say something?
Well, I just wanted to back up and touch on a couple of things. So I did reference in here some of the legislation that is potentially pending. So there was some legislation that would restrict any local millage proposal to November elections. I doubt that has any legs. I won't say worried because I don't know the ins and outs, but I think that there might be some chance for the consolidated elections and changing it to June, November.
You mean this year?
Not I don't know.
It would not go into effect until
24.
Yeah, I don't think they're not gonna
Yeah, actually, I think they will. But there's a lot of.
Will die or will go through.
I think it's got at least a 50-50 chance, not more.
I didn't think it had any chance, but I've heard that there are some clerks or accountants. I'm not as intimately familiar, but I heard that there is some support for it, but I don't know where it falls on.
Where does the clerk association?
We supported, the only people that objected were the schools because they can't figure out how to do their tax assessment apparently.
So we're happy to bring back information. We can, I just want to be clear of what we're being asked to bring back. So to Andrea's question about we can bring back our past presentations on why you know, new building versus renovation and that type of information. And then what about the financial? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Size.
The build out, put in the whole numbers and things like that. The rest of the building is still aged. It's gonna, you know, our financial consultant, our professional recommended that you're beyond the point of repairs are cost effective than demolition and rebuild, things like that.
And if you remember too, we did look at some other locations and buying existing buildings, and yeah, the cost of renovating or adding on is very prohibitive compared to building new as well. So that factored into the equation, because we as a team, I think, had fully expected if there's another building that probably will be more desirable, and that's where the data came back to rebuild in the same location. So and then and again, this does not have to necessarily be decided tonight because we don't have any action, but as I said, really the first decision is if there is the will to move forward with figuring out how to do the building, is that our recommendation is to continue on to get it to the 60% design, so that we're ready to go with those numbers to be able to push out to bid. So Chrisman has been working on those. Again, we've paused them. It's easier to pick back up from a milestone. So again, that doesn't have to be decided tonight. Just don't want it to go too long because there are contractual issues there.
I'm curious about the new plan. So part of the new plan was to take down that Parks building, right?
Well, the old water building.
Yeah, whatever. There were a couple of things. Yeah.
And the sheriff's substation.
Yeah,
yes.
and
yeah.
plus you mentioned the water main needs to be moved, and that was part of the plan of the rebuild too, was it not?
That was not included into the plan, but I mean, while we were out there working, that would be easier to do.
So are there parts of the building rebuild that impact, you know, other things like taking down buildings that we don't need anymore that we could do now in preparation for the bond for the redo of the building? And I don't know if you have an answer to that or not. Just thinking, you know, maybe we could piecemeal little bits of it and pay for it as we go before we have to have the bond for the whole building.
Yeah,
or
I mean, the water main can be, that's somewhat of a standalone. Some of these things you really do get, you know, economies for scale. So we could knock down that building, but again, doing a big project, it's easier to do a lot of that stuff all at once. In terms of the things that we will have to do for the sheriff's substation, again, you know, we try to keep the building running. We have not put a lot of investment into it. Knowing that, you know, we're working towards a new building, but some of the things just, you know, can't wait. And unfortunately, with the old building, you do try to limp along, and then sometimes it's kind of like the dam breaks, and you know have to deal with it as it comes. But you try to balance the amount that you're putting into it.
Brian, on the water main.
I know you had mentioned a while back when we were doing all this research that there was a plan to place the staff in a temporary building. Do you know what that cost was?
Yeah, we had a line item. I think it was roughly $200,000, $250,000. So it would be about a year and a half lease on the temporary house. The Delta Patrol.
And would that provide the wish list like locker room space or it's just
That would be.
primarily office space?
It would be primarily office space. Ideally, with the right location, you could accomplish some of that, but it certainly would not be the wish list. It would be getting by, but keeping our people up here, because we talked about, you know, starting a lot of Charlotte, but it really takes away the service to our residents and that type of thing. So it's not an ideal thing to have to do, but that did factor into our entire, you know, the entire equation, and that becomes the best way to attack this. And, you know, for us, and have to just figure out a way to get by for that year at the end of the building.
Well, why I shared that is if it looks like this building is going to fall apart or be unsafe, that perhaps considering this temporary space, instead of trying to put money into this old building, and we really don't want it, it's just too much to do, to use the dollars for temporary space until we can get through this proposal to get it back on the ballot and approved by the voters.
Well, if it got to that, I think we probably hate to sign a lease not knowing we are going into the building. So we have not done. We did have a real estate broker who was on the team with Chrisman to, you know, at first it was mainly identifying other locations that we could possibly move the substation to, and it'll transition into, he will help, he'll find the temporary location, but again, we do not have a temporary location identified at this time, so it'll have to be the right fit. That would be kind of hopefully last case scenario, moving in somewhere else without knowing that this is, you know, going forward. I don't know if that kind of explains.
It does. I'm just thinking we should think about something in the event that, you know, something really goes bad, and it's just, it would cost a ton of money to just fix that one issue, but it doesn't address the bigger picture. So I think having an idea, having a, you know, at least a plan, not that you have to execute it, but having a contingent plan may not be a bad way to go.
Becca, response to your question too about staging it.
Yeah.
That building that's going to be torn down is going to be replaced.
Yeah.
So tearing it down without having the replacement building for parks.
There were a couple other little auxiliary things that they said they were going to take down at the same time.
Right, but they were going to build another one. So that's, you still end up with, now you're shuffling, where do you put this stuff?
Yeah.
And in answer to your question, the Grand Ledge Schools turnout was 19.95%. And that was with Props 3 of 18 in place.
And I guess also circling back to if we do put it on the ballot again, we do, I think, as you know, being the only thing away from public safety, we'll have to have probably a more concerted campaign from outside. I feel like we did all we can do internally. As you mentioned, our hands are somewhat tied, so we put out a lot of public information and education through the mediums that we have with our newsletters and public events and social media and that type of thing. But and I think it helped or worked for the public safety side, but couldn't get us over, you know, roughly have 1,300 votes to pick up on the bond proposal, which admittedly is a little bit harder for folks to understand.
Do a video, walk through the substation and show the problems and talk about the needs and that sort of thing. That alone could get you those 1,300 votes. Sometimes put it up on social media.
And I think the other thing to consider is, do we want, well, I think a bond is always hard to understand versus a millage. But the second thing is it costs more in interest, but going to a $0.5 mil and extending it over 20 years instead of 10 is another option. I think it must be a property that are.
Put that at it, it is, and Courtney can provide those numbers at some time. It's quite a bit more interest.
The longer the duration, the more expensive it is. It's that simple. 30-year mortgage is going to be more expensive than a 15. So, I had a question too. Just on that water main. I understand economies of scale. You don't want to be digging up with an excavator when you're just for that when you have everything. Plus, it's underneath the building, I suspect. Some of it.
Well, that's the problem is it is underneath the building. So we need to, it goes in behind the building and then under the building and then over to
substation fire protection.
Yeah.
So is that that's not a sewer line, that's a water main feed.
Yeah.
Feed.
Water main. So we would have to basically cap that off there because that also serves MDOT garage and have to run a new lead basically from Administration Drive up to that. So then we can abandon the piece that's underneath the building.
Does MDOT have a meter?
No, it's what happened is the original routing of the water main, we had two buildings and then they connected them together, which ended up over top of the main. That's how it happened. It's a 6-inch unwrapped ductile iron pipe that's really rough shape. We had to cut 12 feet out to find enough to put band-aids on it.
I appreciate that, but this water, does MDOT pay for its water?
No, MDOT does pay for water.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So my question is that couldn't the water fund pay for that portion of it? The relocation? Something to explore.
If we get to 60%, how long is the design deliverables good for? And if we don't get the millage, would we have to start the process all over again?
Very question.
If we do get to the 60% design, how long is that good for?
Well, we can put it on the shelf. It'd be good. It's a milestone that we would have deliverables in the form of drawings and reports and specifications that we're going to put in a file. And then if we want to pick it up again, you know, have a good starting point to pick it up and finish it. You're still going to have about three months of design left to get to 100% where you can bid it. So it's a good stop. It's a clean stopping point.
Okay, so it's good for as long as we have it.
Yeah. Nothing. I mean, when they go to take it to 100%, they'll have to clean up any code changes or it's, you know, a period of time passes. But it's good content. The only reason I wouldn't want to proceed is if you come to me and say, we gotta cut this cost of this project in half. Well, you're gonna have to cut the building in half. It's going to be a new design. So if you think you really want to significantly downside the project, then that's probably the big thing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jim has a question.
Who does?
Jim Schweitzer.
Oh, Jim, sorry.
I know this is kind of off base, but any thought at all to like moving? I know we like to be centralized, but like Macy's got that old wide open space down there in the mall. Has anybody looked at the possibility of that as a replacement?
We did look at, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, answer.
Yeah, we did look at that. That was part of our extensive thorough study that we did. We looked at probably, I don't know, 23 different locations, and we had a matrix of different things that we looked at in terms of, you know, ingress, egress, security, utilities, centralization, ability to serve, response times. A lot of that played into it. So, and the Lansing Mall site has some different other challenges. So that was eliminated from consideration, but it was certainly part of the study.
Anything else? Great, well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Let's up into it. Any final public comment? Okay, none, seeing no further business before I adjourn here.
Oh, sorry, I had something that I wanted to bring up. I have had constituents, residents ask me what's going on with Delta Crossings. And I thought, since we were looking at the CIA budget and all that sort of thing, that maybe we could get an update on not only what's going on with the property, with the building, with the lawsuits, that sort of thing, but also if our attorneys could come in and speak to what we need to know as a township about these lawsuits and if it impacts us, how it impacts us, how it impacts our CIA and our development plan, because our development plan was designed to reimburse the developer who is now embroiled in these lawsuits and that sort of thing. And so I want to know what our liability is and if there is any liability. So for a future meeting.
Yeah, I can bring things back up, but just a couple points of clarification. We do not have a developer's agreement signed with the developer, so there is no obligation in terms of reimbursing the developer at this point. And if the value is not being created, which of course now the plan is falling, you know, pretty far behind, the CIA is still capturing the incremental growth, but that is just lower than what is anticipated. But at this point, there's no obligation to the developer.
Even though it's all written in the development plan.
Correct. There was no developer agreement.
And does the CIA board have any plans to revise the development plan? Or maybe they're waiting for some outcomes, these lawsuits or anything?
I think they're waiting, but the plan is it's a guidance document. So it says these are the eligible costs, and even though it specifies Delta Crossings or Brookside or whatever, those are the eligible categories that CIA money could be expended on. So those are still accurate moving forward, and that could change if, say, a new developer comes in and says this is what I'd like to do in a different type of arrangement. But the original arrangement is dollar amounts now are out of whack. That's a question for the attorney if the development plan and TIF plan needs to be revised in terms of that. But it's not, there's not any obligation on the township at this point. It certainly is a change from what was envisioned.
Yeah, because I'm concerned that, another developer comes in and they see the development plan and they think that that's just, you know, public money waiting to be claimed by someone. And, you know, how we feel about that going forward if we want to stay in that position.
Well, they can think that, but once again, it'd be the township would make any decisions that any developer comes from.
And as I say, the part with the development agreement and that type of thing is it's contingent on creating the value. So right now the plan is falling behind in value, so there's not the same dollars for TIF capture and that type of thing.
Question, Dennis. So to that point, I understand the property sold. We don't know to whom, my understanding. We don't know what, if anything, they're going to do with it. And we passed a TIF based on a development plan that had a vision and somewhat of a general timeline, and that is stopped. And the likelihood of that being the same by a future developer is probably very, very slim at best. And so I suspect that if a developer is interested in doing something, they're going to have a whole different idea of a development plan for that. I think, Beth, what you're getting at is that the basis of what the board established for a development plan and the reimbursement of the TIF you know, is that the signal that we want to send to a developer that we're going to reimburse them for $14 million based on just the value that is going to be an entirely different development plan? And is that an entitlement that they should expect when we haven't even seen what their development plan is going to be? Should we have a reassessment of that? The numbers are going to be different. The build out is going to be different. The timeline is going to be different. And all those assumptions are basically cast aside now. So the question from a township perspective is, are we being negligent in any way that we're ignoring that and waiting for someday a developer coming to us and then we assess that? But all this duration, we're withholding 80% to taxing jurisdictions based on a development plan that doesn't exist anymore. And are they entitled to receive 100% until such time as we reestablish a development plan and a revised TIF? I mean, that's the legal question that I have as treasurer. You know, I don't know if we have legal liability there. And I would like to know that. So that's a deeper issue, but they're all convoluted to that. And I just don't know if we should just wait into some unknown period of time, another 6 months, a year, or whatever, and just let things go? Or do we take some sort of, what are our options, I guess, from a legal point of view? And what is our legal obligation? Because we may have one there. And I just think not addressing it is irresponsible.
Yeah, there's not a legal obligation there. I think your, policy decision of revising the plan, and that certainly an attorney can probably speak better to whether or not that's a good thing to do or not to do, but there's not an obligation, a legal obligation. We're under no legal issues here to be concerned about. Certainly there are other concerns in terms of, the development not going as proceeding along as we had wanted it to, the TIF capturing less than what was intended, but that happens all the time in TIF districts, throughout the state. It's a plan, it's a guidance plan, and then sometimes things don't go as how they were determined, but we have the legal tax sharing agreements are signed. There's the stipulations in that. I'm not sure what type of legal obligations or trouble that you're.
Well, there's still other things that we can do as part of the plan that isn't reimbursing the developer, right? So MDOT's going to boulevard that if we want to add things to the boulevard. I mean, we can still use the capture money for that. We can use it for the corridor improvement plan for the whole corridor, So I think if the only thing in our TIF capture plan was reimbursing the developer, then we wouldn't have anything else to spend it on. But we do have other qualified costs that we included in the plan beyond just the 14 million that was assumed for the developer. So as long as we're still doing those things.
But what if the county comes to us and says, hey, boulevarding Saginaw isn't going to benefit the rest of the county, so we want our money back?
Yeah, I mean, they don't, they signed those agreements and it didn't say, like Brian was saying, it's a, you hope the plan goes through, but if we started spending it on something that was not in the plan, then absolutely.
But why would we assume that the 80% is set aside for reimbursement to a previous developer for infrastructure that no longer exists? And
we don't have to do it. We just use it on other things. We don't have to set it aside.
That's not what we sold the TIF to when we went to these taxing jurisdictions. That's not the message we sent them. It was going to be used to reimburse the development for the infrastructure.
But with a lot of other things though.
I think we should just wait, bring in the attorneys, they can explain it and help them understand it. So we'll wait for the attorneys.
It's convoluted subject. That's what I'm saying.
That was all. Thank you.
There's not anybody else. Okay.
No, I have something. We received a letter at our last meeting from Tri-County Bicycle Association. And, you know, it's an advocacy organization, and I understand they may not be on top of what the township is doing or whatever, and I'm not sure they articulated their message as well as they could have. But I think they're a valuable nonprofit advocacy group that does a lot of good things in the area, the general area. And I think that I'd like to hear from them. I'd like to ask them to come before the board and explain, you know, what their message, what they were trying to say in their letter, to better explain that, because I think it could be easily confused with, you know, how they worded it and things like that, and really what they were trying to say. So I would like to entertain that the board ask them to come and make a presentation before board trustees to tell us what their message was, what they were trying to convey. And I hope they would make that invitation to them.
I would support having them come in. I do think they're a partner, and I apologize, Dennis. I thought you were just going to raise the issue. I was happy to bring up that it'd be helpful to have a presentation. They've been a partner with the township, and just to kind of talk about, you know, their priorities, their vision. Obviously, we want to continue that partnership and understand what those opportunities might be going forward, and so I think that would be beneficial.
Sure.
You know.
So what I'm proposing is that Brian get a hold of them and then make the invitation to come before and make a presentation. That wouldn't just be limited to 3 minutes of public comment. You know, they'd probably have a little longer presentation.
But could we have some structure? Because I don't really want some of the,
So what do you mean by structure, right?
in terms of a length of time that's going to be.
You can just have them do a special
respected.
presentation like they've been on, then we have other people come.
Sure.
We just have them standing do the presentation.
Yeah, and I could even also give an update on everything that we've done, because there does seem to be a disconnect that they do not understand a lot of what we've done with pathways and that type of thing. So that'll be a good time to educate them as well.
Maybe what we could do is have like you guys, you know, Parks Department or something, do a presentation with them where they talk about all we've done, all we've spent, all the various types of grants we've received over the years. Because there did seem to be this disconnect where they thought we didn't know how to apply for grants and everything, and offer Genie Pro right to educate us. So maybe having a presentation where we talk about what we have done, where the grants come from, how much we spent total, how much the township has invested, and then have that in conjunction with their presentation. I think that could be very beneficial.
Great.
Great. Okay. So if there's nothing else, we are adjourned.
Years.